Hello, all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are going to be reviewing the film Point Break. Sarah, do you want to kick us off with an IMDb summary for Point Break?
Sure. An FBI agent goes undercover to catch a gang of surfers who may be bank robbers.
Who maybe.
Maybe. I don't know. We're going to find out. We're going to do some surfing first, though.
Yes. So before we do our one-sentence summaries and all that goodness, Sarah, this is your winning spoils. So we get to talk about and review Point Break. Do you want to share a little about the backstory for why we're talking about Point Break today?
Yeah. I like the idea of using the Oscar wager movie to just expand our film horizons. You know, there's a lot of movies that I know that I haven't seen. And I think this is a really great opportunity for us to just experience something new. And I know Point Break is just a beloved film by many. And I've just been curious, and it's been on my watch list for a while, and it just sounded like a really fun time. You know, I love the Oscars season. It's so much fun to watch all of the nominees and do all of that. But a lot of those movies are like serious, and it's like cinema, you know, and we're talking about these really like deep themes and really difficult stories and all of this. And they're so great, and it's so much fun. And this seems like a really good opportunity to just do something completely different, to do something fun, and see why so many people love Point Break. So, you know, I am grateful that you decided to join me on this journey of watching Point Break.
Because you are our Oscar wager winner of this year.
I know. Oh my gosh, Jen, I won. This is so shocking.
The crowd goes wild. And you made a great choice. Honestly, we needed this. We needed this movie. I think we said it back like 6 weeks ago. We're like, man, we're going to need to have some fun because we survived movies like 3 hours and a half of The Brutalist and Nickel Boys and September 5 and I'm Still Here. All incredible films. Go listen to our conversations or reviews. But like you mentioned, very heavy, very serious, very important subject matter, but it's kind of a lot. And sometimes we just want to be like out in the sun surfing with your dudes, you know? Maybe solve some cases while we're at it. Maybe not. We'll see.
I mean, yeah. It's a great combination. You know, you got some surfing going on, you got a little investigating going on. It's a great time.
Yeah. Barely any investigating going on.
Right.
Oh, it's so great. Well, excited to talk about this movie. Honestly, I just love watching a 90s movie is what I realized while watching this film. It takes me back. I just feel good about the world, and it gives me hope for humanity in the future, knowing that there was this pure, sweet time where movies were like this, you know? So it was fun to go back and watch a 90s movie specifically.
Yeah. And I think that nostalgia factor is just also so fun. You know, I feel like 80s and 90s movies, they both have such distinct styles to them. And there's just something fun and nostalgic about revisiting those time periods because the world was very different then. And it's nice to go back in time every once in a while.
Yeah. So I'll have lots of thoughts about that. But that was a great experience, a great choice on picking a 90s movie specifically too. Okay, well, let's do our one-sentence summaries for Point Break. Sarah, what is yours?
My summary is, full moons only lead to trouble.
Nice. And trouble they get into, for sure.
Yes. Indeed.
My one-sentence summary is, be careful about becoming a Bodhi bro.
Honestly, though, like...
The cult.
There's an appeal to becoming a Bodhi bro, but just be careful. You got to watch yourself.
Okay, well, let's share our high-level thoughts about Point Break before we give a spoiler alert and then dive fully into this film. So, Sarah, what do you think about this movie? Do you understand why it has got this cult following and so beloved after watching this movie? Or are you scratching your head?
No, I get it. honestly, for the first 2/3 of this film, I was all in. I was like, yes, I am here for this. I was a Bodhi bro. Like, I was down. I was like, this is a great time. We're surfing. We're doing a little bank robbery, FBI business. This is great. I'm having a blast. Then there are some choices that are made in the third act that I really didn't enjoy. They're all tropes, so they have to happen. I understand that they have to happen, but that didn't stop me from just being like, why do we have to do this? But on the whole, this movie is so fun. It's just a good action movie time, you know? And it also just made me miss Patrick Swayze, who was just a wonderful actor, and he brought so much to the roles that he was in. And I think that this movie in the hands of like a less talented director and then without Patrick Swayze, this movie could have been really bad and like a B movie, but I think just the team, both behind the camera and front of the camera, just had so much talent to make what otherwise might have been just like a pulpy movie that everybody forgot into this thing that is so beloved by many. So yeah, I get it. I'm here for it. I had a great time. What about you?
Yeah, I loved it as well. I wasn't sure how I would feel about it going into it. I think quite quickly the film establishes what kind of movie it is tonally. And like after that point, I'm like, I'm on board. Like, let's go on this ride. I do agree with you that Swayze is the MVP of this movie because his charisma is absolutely electric on screen. And without that, like the emotional core of this movie doesn't work at all. Like the whole emotional turmoil that Johnny is going through, it doesn't work, but you're watching him just be absolutely captivated by this person and make so many important decisions at key moments where he folds. And I'm like, yeah, I would fold too, because there's an electric personality that you want to be around them. You want to be in their orbit. Their words carry weight. I was thinking a lot about Tyler Drayden from Fight Club and kind of that electric, almost magnetic, intoxicating personality. And I feel like Bodhi is definitely like that, and Patrick Swayze absolutely sells that. So I think he does an incredible job. We get baby Keanu, which is so endearing, and I think it's neat to just see the Keanu charm just so fully on display way back all this time, and seeing that really work for that character specifically as well, and that casting alignment was perfect. So yeah, I had a great time with this movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. I was just laughing to myself in a lot of their argument sequences. It's just so 90s in the way that they like fling an insult and they think it's supposed to be like cutting and deeply wounding, and you're like, oh, that's cute. That's really nice. So I loved all of that. I ate it up.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is from a different time, just on so many levels. And that really is part of the charm. You see the things that the characters are concerned about, and the way that they speak is all so different than how I feel like our world is today. And that's just such a great just environment to spend some time in. Plus, you're hanging out at the beach, you're surfing, you're doing your thing. Like, this is just a fun hangout movie with these characters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point, which is that like there's obviously some big set pieces, but I feel like for the most of this film, it's not big and flashy. I think I've I kind of knew that this film was like an action thriller, and I would say like there are action sequences in it, but by our 2025 standards, like it is not that big flashy huge set pieces, long car chases that go on for minutes and minutes and minutes. It's a lot of times we're just hanging out with Johnny and Bodhi and their crew. And I think that's maybe also why this movie works so well and it's so timeless as well, because you just want to go back and hang out with your friends that are problematic but really fun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You definitely want to hang out with them. I love your point about, Keanu being so endearing in this role. And I think that's spot on because Johnny really is, there's something earnest about him. And you're just
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, you can do it, buddy. And then, like you said, Bodhi is just so electric, and you're pulled into his orbit. And I love that this film takes the time to really explore who each of these characters are and like showcase that and give us enough time to feel a type of bond with both Johnny and Bodhi before things start to kind of really go off the rails.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we can give a spoiler here as we start to dive into the film a little bit more. So, if you haven't seen Point Break, it came out in 91. So, it's been very many decades at this point. So, we're just going to dive fully in. This is a really fun movie to throw on. And you know what's so funny is I think it's also the kind of movie that you could pick up again at any scene in the middle and ride it out to the end and have like the best time. So, I see how this movie could have done really well in just being broadcast on TV, and you just kind of throw it on, you flip through the channels, and you discover this movie's on, and just watch it till the end and hang out with your crew. So this movie's definitely a really fun time, and both Sarah and I really enjoyed it. So we are diving fully into this movie now. So one of the things that I noted that I thought was so smart to do is that the first big action sequence, which is the raid on the surfers' homes with the lawnmower and walkie-talkies, which we'll talk about a little bit, it doesn't happen until an hour into the film. And I think the film in total is like 2 hours, maybe a couple minutes more. And so the pacing of allowing us enough time to just see Johnny getting acquainted with this crew and waiting until the whole first hour goes by before we get something that's adrenaline pumping, I thought was just such a smart choice.
Yeah, yeah, because I think if all of that action stuff had been introduced earlier, then this film doesn't work. You know, you mentioned that it's really reliant on this relationship between Johnny and Bodhi, and you need to see who Johnny is himself, just what is his resting state, who is he as a person,
Right.
and then you need to see how that relationship with Bodhi starts to influence him, and you need to see that pull that Bodhi has on him to then understand all the stuff that happens in the final act, basically. And you need to spend enough time with Bodhi and his crew outside of the bank robberies to kind of understand their ethos and their worldview and kind of their motivations and how they go about their lives, to then make all of those choices that Bodhi makes and all of his escalations as he spirals out of control kind of make sense and provide a really interesting contrast to this character that otherwise might not have been as interesting. You know, if we hadn't seen kind of Bodhi in his regular, normal, in control environment, then all of those escalating choices at the end might not have been as jarring. So I think that first hour is just so important in setting up everything that we see at the end of the film.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it also helped. I love your point specifically around spending enough time with Bodhi and his crew. I really feel like the film gets us enough emotional investment into each of the individuals in his crew, which another film might have just kind of kept them a little bit more like broadly written and with broad strokes, where we kind of know that they're part of the crew, but they kind of just congeal into like Bodhi plus his groupies, you know what I mean? And I think we really do see their individual distinct personalities, and I think that makes the implications of the ending sequence where they're each getting taken out feels that much more weighty. Like, I was genuinely like, oh my gosh, this man just died. He's just a kid that's figuring out the world, and I felt that emotional investment. And I think had the film maybe just painted them all and clumped them together as like Bodhi's group in a broad strokes way, that ending sequence wouldn't have hit home as much as it did too.
Yeah, it's not Bodhi and his groupies, but they are all, individual people and contributors. And I love those moments when they're just kind of hanging out at the beach, and you see in those moments their personalities are so different, and these opportunities for these other guys to speak up or to push back or to have input or whatever. And you see kind of those group dynamics playing out to help set up like Oh wow. This is really bad. What has happened?
Yeah, yeah, it all unravels quite quickly. Quite quickly indeed. Let's talk a little bit about the raid on the surfers' homes more specifically. It's the first big action sequence in the film, like we talked about, and I was really impressed with it. I thought that the use of the lawnmower and the kind of whirring of that sound kind of drowning out Johnny's ability to communicate over the walkie-talkies and the way that that scene builds and explodes was really effective. I was so pleasantly surprised. I mean, I went into this film thinking like, okay, it's going to be a really fun thriller action movie, but I was tempering my expectations a little bit because it's the 90s and things look different and the technology was different and the way that scenes and especially action scenes are paced was very different. But I was just so impressed at how effective in creating tension and then creating catharsis and explosion at the end of that sequence and the way it builds was executed. I thought it was really well done and it really set my expectations higher for the next sequences after the rest of the film to be like, oh no, this movie's got it. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, that scene is so good. And I love that it all starts with Johnny getting there late, So, like, he's already scrambling and flustered. He's not in place. This whole thing has started off kind of on the wrong foot. And I think that that's an important piece that the whole raid starts with this like frenetic energy even more than you would already feel, I would imagine, going into a raid. And then like you said, the walkie-talkie being drowned out by the lawnmower, and I love that we're getting these back and forth shots because we know what's coming, but the characters don't, which creates so much tension in us. It's that whole Hitchcock thing of you show the audience the bomb, but you don't show the characters the bomb so that the audience is nervous. And that's exactly what we get here. And that just ratchets up all of the tension because we know what's going to happen to these characters. And then we have to watch them go through this horrible ordeal that could have been stopped. And so you're right. That's such an effective scene at creating so much tension, especially because we don't really have investment in two of the four agents, the two that are kind of antagonistic toward Johnny. And yet in that scene, because it's so tense and they're walking into such a volatile and dangerous situation, we feel for all of them, even though the other dudes are just jerks and kind of antagonistic toward Johnny. And so I thought that was a really powerful choice to not pit these two groups of agents against each other, but they are working together. And this is a dangerous situation, and we are concerned for all of them that are involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's also interesting that Angelo is the one that's in the most danger, and it's Johnny that needs to communicate to tell the other agents to like get him out of there. And it's not flipped. It's not Johnny that's in danger because I think that would have been maybe too early in the film for the film to cash in all of the emotional investment that we have in Johnny, and just the responsibility of this being the raid that he organized and now he's put this man in danger and him having to scramble was almost more tension inducing than Johnny himself being already in danger by hour one of the movie. I think that would have maybe been effective, but maybe a little bit cheap. And then there's less runway for all of those big climactic action sequences where Johnny is very much in danger in the second half of the film. So I thought that just that intentional choice was really, really great and very wise, because I think there's another version of this where you flip the two of them and Johnny's the one that's rolling up to the house and Angelo's the one that's covering for him at the side window, but they actually flip it. And so I thought that was a neat choice and very smart.
And I think it also speaks to who Johnny is too. And obviously he's a newbie, but he cares really deeply for the people that he cares about. And you can hear and see and feel just the terror in his voice. And you could see it on his face as he's trying to do whatever he can to protect his partner from danger, like imminent, big, scary, real danger. And he's also stuck. And you can see and sense that helplessness that he has as well. And so it's all of these really complex emotions that he's feeling in this moment, and reveals just so much about who he is as a character as well. So we had seen kind of like cool, calm, and collected Johnny. We see a little, angry Johnny when he's trying to get what he needs for this case and nobody's listening to him. We see like joking, all of these other sides. But in this, we see like that desperation and that fear to try and protect someone that he cares about, and he can't do anything. And you see that kind of like stuckness that he has. And I think that that's a really interesting thing to then set up kind of the rest of the film, when he is taking matters into his own hands and making increasingly dangerous decisions, and just trying to do the best that he can with the hand that he's dealt. And I don't know, there's probably some like vengeance and revenge that gets mixed in there too, but it all kind of starts at that raid sequence, and we see those deeper and those other sides of Johnny then.
Yes, which I think goes back to a point that you were making earlier around just his earnestness and how much that is so key to this character. And Keanu does an incredible job, like making that so believable, because time and time again throughout this film, we see that Johnny's just a big softie. Like his heart is so big. He cares so deeply for people. He feels quickly connected. He's not the typical like agent, undercover spy that is like his heart is cold and he's been, like pressed by the world and therefore he's hardened. Like he is not that at all. He's just a young dude trying to figure it out, and his emotions get really involved. And I think that's a big part of even the ending of this film, with him choosing to let Bodhi go and have his final moments be him doing the things that he loves. Like his heart is soft, and you see him fold because he cares so deeply. And obviously Bodhi recognizes that and uses and manipulates that. We've seen that a million times in movies of like, let's take the person that you love and use that to control you because we'll blackmail you with it. We've seen that a million times, but it works so effectively specifically for Johnny as well, because his heart is so big and he can't help but make some of those decisions that might be poor for the mission, but it's his big human heart getting involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that in the beginning of the film, Gary Busey's character makes fun of him and calls him like the quarterback jock. He's like totally stereotyping him into this one mold. And we see over the course of the film that Johnny is much more than that. He is much more than just a quarterback. He has that big heart, and that gets him into trouble, but also he eventually gets the job done.
Eventually. Long time coming. Yeah. It's so 90s, that earnestness. I love it so much. We honestly, when this movie started, and I was like, oh my gosh, our primary criminals are just these surfer dudes that are dressing up as ex-presidents and going to rob some banks, and they're not killing people, they're just robbing some banks. I'm like, this is our foe. I'm so glad this is our foe. And I feel like we get so many more movies later on in later decades that are so big in scale. It's like, here's this supervillain that's trying to take over the world with this groundbreaking new chemical technology because science, and the whole world is at stake, and we must save the world. Everything is so big, and I just love how small and scoped, and our villains are really like not even that bad. Like they're not just like pure blood evil that's trying to like take over the world. They're just some dudes that are trying to like rebel against the system using some not so great methods, but like they're not killing people, they're not harming people, they're not, that it's so small in scale, and I just love that.
Yeah, I did too. And honestly, I was kind of rooting for Bodhi and his gang. Like, I was a Bodhi bro for quite a bit, and then they started murdering people. And, well, they kidnapped a woman and held her against her will. And that was kind of when I was like, okay, I can no longer be a Bodhi bro. But, up until that final act, I was like, I mean, it's fine, right? Like, they're not hurting anybody. I'm sure the banks are insured, so it's probably fine, right? Like, can't the FBI be focused on, I don't know, some other like
Right?
violent crimes instead? I just I just had some questions about why we were devoting so much manpower to this one case, but it ended up in a good fun surfer bank robber movie, so I'm not mad at it, but I was definitely like, what is this FBI field office's priorities here? Like, what is going on? But I love that like Bodhi is so just magnetic and you want to hang out with him. And so even though we know robbery is wrong, robbing banks is wrong, those are bad things that we shouldn't do. It's one of those cases where like my morals were kind of like, well, it's not the worst thing that can happen, you know? They're not hurting anybody. It's okay. And so you see like you like these characters and you want to spend time with them, so you start to kind of like rationalize or justify why they're not that bad. And I just love that a movie can make you do those things. And I feel like Point Break does that so effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are kind of conflicted, and I think that's why this movie works and why the ending and all of the choices Johnny makes throughout the film also work. Like if we were purely on Johnny's side and Bodhi wasn't so captivating, I'd be like, dude, you're botching the mission. Like, what are you doing? I'm upset at you. But in fact, like, I get it. I understand why you fold in so many of these moments because you too felt a connection to these guys and you liked them too and you were kind of rooting for them too. And so in the same way that our hearts are getting conflicted as the movie unfolds, we are able to empathize with Johnny as well because he also is feeling that internal conflict of making the right choice for his original mission, but kind of getting distracted and caught up in it all along the way. And I feel like that is so real and that is so valid. And so that mirroring of how we as the viewers are feeling about this crew and kind of interrogating our own moral compass and choices, I feel like we're seeing Johnny do that as well. I would have been yelling at the screen if I hated Bodhi and Johnny still making these choices. But in fact, I'm like, yeah, makes sense. I get it. Let him go do his thing. Let him go surf for his final moments. All right.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that. Especially because I I appreciate that the subtext of the conversation was Bodhi essentially being like, I'm I'm done. Like, this is my last thing. I'm gonna be taken out by this wave. I'm done. I just need to do this thing, and then I am content. I am finished. And Johnny just being like, yeah, bro, go ahead.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, yeah, I get it. I get it. Makes sense.
Okay, another thing that I really appreciate in this movie related to Bodhi and his crew is that we get a little bit of his ethos and his manifestos and what they stand for, but I appreciate that they didn't bang us over the head with that. I think that like another version of this movie would just like go so heavily into how much this crew like is fighting for their views of the system and rebelling against it and that being like their defining trait. And I just love that we get some of that, but just not too much. I think it would have maybe crushed a little bit of the what makes them just like naturally electric and let that shine through versus us being like barreled over the head with all of their anti-establishment ideology, which I mean, like we could always get behind, but I think too much of it would have felt kind of just I don't know, not right for the tone of the movie and would have taken away, I think, some of the allure and magnetism that they have, which is that we don't really care even what they believe. I'm like, even if we didn't know a lot of that, just them being them and their rapport together and their chemistry together is more than enough for us to buy into them. So I thought it was smart and I appreciate that the movie didn't go so heavily in on Bodhi's ideology and like it literally being a cult.
Right? I mean, I don't know, this is two steps removed from a cult, so very easily could have gotten there. I was also glad that it wasn't this like Robin Hood type situation either, because I could have seen the film going in that direction as well, of like anti-capitalist, we're going to rob from the banks, the soulless corporation, we're going to give it to the people. I'm glad that it didn't go that route either. And it's just and it's a mix of the reason why they're doing this. Obviously, they want to fund their lifestyles and be able to go surfing all year round and all of that. But there's also that adrenaline rush piece of it, too, that the film really
Mm.
introduces in that second half. And I think that's also an interesting component to it as well. You know, it's not purely monetary, it's not purely anti-establishment, but it's a mix of all of these different things that have caused them to take this specific course of action.
Mm. Yeah. No, that's very true. It's like they're not even it, they're not overly altruistic, you know, which which is great. I think they don't even do this for all year round. They only do it for the summer.
Yeah.
Which is such a fun detail. I'm like, and I think it paints them a little bit more with that, like, just that youthfulness of like they're just like kids hanging out and trying to like. I mean, they're not just kids hanging out, of course. Like morally, this is very wrong, but also they're just like young dudes hanging out, and this is just like they're getting up to some funny business, and theirs happens to be just real problematic. But also, I think it paints their intentions a little differently than them like trying to amass mass amounts of money and whatnot. Like they're just having fun. This happens to be their version of fun.
Yeah, let's maybe find a different version of fun.
Yeah.
But I I love also the limits and the boundaries that they set for themselves, you know, that there is an amount that they're working toward, and then they say enough is enough and they go away for a while. You know, they only do it for these months and then that's it. You know, they have their limits of not going into the vault. They're only taking what's in the drawers. And so all of those things I think also help make this a crew that even though they're doing something wrong, you're not like repulsed by, and you don't have this like moral indignation about them because they do have limits, and they're not being driven by this crazy greed, or you know, they want to like dominate and annihilate and all these like big things. No, they're just trying to get some money so they can spend their time surfing. Like, all right. Live your lives.
This is just their funding mechanism, all right?
Right.
Oh. Yeah. No, I think that's key. That's really key to us also buying into them. And I think if their motivations were painted a little bit differently, like they make it be still very captivating, but maybe there's even more emotional turmoil. Whereas I feel like we were just kind of like, yeah, let's buy into them.
Yeah, let's go rob some banks, I guess. Like, all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Other big things that stood out to you in this film?
Okay. So my turning point in this film where I started to have less of a good time is
Oh,
when Bodhi kidnapped Tyler. That was
yeah.
where I went. Like, obviously it has to happen because of the tropes and we need this to happen because 90s action movie. I understand. I still really hated it, and I think the piece that made it as well, there's a couple parts of it that made it, I think, for me, like especially vile, is the fact that Bodhi and Tyler used to have a relationship, and then he would go and do this to her, and just showing like how callous that is. But then I think what makes it worse is that she is in her little skimpy night dress, and
Yeah.
she's not even fully clothed. And so she is extra vulnerable because she has been captured and is being held for ransom by these violent men, but also she is barely clothed while that is happening. And I hated all of that And I know it had to happen with the story to get Johnny to go along. I get it. But I just, man, that was the point where I was like, I have been having so much fun with this movie, and now I'm having much less fun because of
Yeah.
that. So that was kind of the start of my like, dang it. This film is starting to
Hmm.
go downhill for me.
Which I think, yeah, I agreed. It also adds a lot of tension to the film and like complexity, which I think is great
Mhm.
because like we were almost just, you know, absolutely captivated by Bodhi, and then that kind of shatters the minute we see that he is capable of so much, and then now we're having to like interrogate ourselves of like we bought into this too, it's like kind of when you realize you've gone in too deep and you're not sure what you've kind of bought into, but like you've now seen the real ripple effect. So yeah, I think that like, and the timing of when that comes being so late is also really, really great. It doesn't come too early. We get plenty of time to be just kind of caught up in the whirlwind of who Bodhi is. And then we're like, oh no, he's actually capable of so much more. And the other thing that was hard to watch, or just I was like, ooh, Bodhi, man, not a great dude anymore, is he just, as his team members are getting taken out, I mean, I get he's on a mission and he needs to go to safety, but he just is kind of like, oh, we gotta keep going. Like, too bad, sorry. And by the time when he even is reunited with the other dude at the end and they're like riding off in the sunset together, I'm like, no, no, no emotion. He just seems to be like, oops, they got caught along the way. Like, too bad. And I was like, I would have liked to see a little bit more feeling from you.
And I think that's part of what makes Bodhi so interesting too, because you see in the first, I mean, really the first 2/3 of the film, he's charismatic and he's enigmatic and you want to hang out with him. But there is this, like, obviously a desire for this adrenaline rush and for excitement and to be daring and all of these things and the things that he's into, and how, from surfing to football to jumping into the fight to these parties, like he's looking for something, and he's
Yeah.
chasing this high through all of these various means. And so there's a little bit of a daredevil streak in him, but it's very muted. And then once he's found out, though, you see all of that, all of those masks that he had on just come flying off. And that adrenaline rush, adrenaline junkie thing just like comes out so strong, and not really caring about anyone or anything else. And it's just, I have to do the next thing. I have to be the best. I have to get out of this situation. I have to chase the next high. Like, it's this very reactive and out of control part of Bodhi, which I think just makes him a really interesting character, because he's been in control for 2/3 of the film. And then in the final third, he is completely out of control. And
Mhm.
I love that we see that switch flip in him. And I think that helps make the character really interesting to watch. Whereas if he was just in control the entire time, it would be, I mean, the movie would have ended very differently, but I think it would have been a lot less interesting of an ending. But that volatility that we see in him helps make that final third really tense and just kind of off the walls a little bit.
He's almost in survival mode and has tunnel vision and is not really thinking anymore because there's no time to. Yeah. He's almost like so instinctual and reactionary. Man. And there's a lot of real implications from that? Yeah.
Yeah, like real world, real life, all of your friends have died kind of implications.
Literally. And it almost is like
Yeah.
he has not processed any of that at all yet. No capacity to.
hmm Yeah,
Crazy.
which is wild.
Yeah.
He just becomes an entirely different person. It's very fascinating to think
Yeah.
about kind of Bodhi's devolution throughout the entire film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. Okay, other big things from this film. M- Let's see. I I just appreciate that like we get so many surfing scenes, like this film almost is just like we know you want to see big dramatic waves from the opening credits, which are so dramatic, all the way through to the end. That is so prominent, and the film spends so much screen time just giving us that like spectacle. And I thought that was such a fascinating choice. I think it doesn't, I mean, it doesn't, it's the 90s, so it looks fake in a lot of scenes. And by the ending sequence, there's a whole set of waves that are like the water is purple. And I'm like, okay. But it kind of works for this film and the charm of it all, like this film's not trying to be like an accurate depiction of like it's not a documentary about like surfers, and I just kind of love that adds so much interesting texture, and the way that like it adds to the like vibes of this film contributes so much. And I think ironically the fact that it doesn't look so great works for the aging of this film as we watch it in 2025. I'm like, oh, look at that. Like that just it's not intending to be accurate, and I think that actually makes it work well.
Yeah, this movie is it's just a whole vibe. You know, we're hanging out at the beach. We're just surfing. Look at these waves. Like we're just chilling. And I love that. And I think you're right that the way that this is filmed, I mean, obviously this came out in 91, so it looks very different than what we make today. But outside of things like the walkie-talkies and the size of the walkie-talkies, this movie really doesn't look that dated. You know what? Like, I feel like you watch some older movies and you're like, oh, yikes. Like, oh, this was made in a different era, but like in a bad way. This, aside from those types of technology things, and, they're on the computer and it's the green text with the black background, like all of those things, obviously it's old, but I don't know, I feel like the themes, the characters, there's a lot in here that still really works well today. And they've made a movie that still is a great time to watch over 30 years later. And that's that's not that's not something that every film is successful at that came out in the 90s. And I love that Point Break still holds up, still looks good, still fun to watch. That's really impressive.
Yeah, it's quite surprising. And I think that because of the way that it looks in the specific atmosphere that's it's been created, it almost feels like like you mentioned earlier, a nostalgic time and place to go back and revisit. And therefore it doesn't need to hold up. In fact, it's not supposed to hold up, and that's kind of why it can be continually rewatched and is so beloved, is that you feel like you're going back to this captured moment in time. And you can always go back to that captured moment in time, and all of the aesthetics and the clothing that's worn and the way that it looks and feels is frozen in time. And so we can continue to go back and revisit, which is it's neat. It's a neat part of, especially when we think about how films age over time and whether it continues to work or not work. I feel like this is a smart choice and a strategic choice for this to continue to just be kind of a memory, almost a photograph that you can go back to and revisit, and it always be there. It always looks the same. Bodhi's still the way he is, the waves are still giant and dramatic, and but that's part of the vibe. It's just such a vibes movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. And you mentioned it earlier, but this has such high rewatchability too. And I think that's also part of the reason why it's so beloved, is because you can just rewatch it and hang out with these guys and just want to go surfing again with them, and that makes this film just easy to just put on. You know what's going to happen, you know who these characters are, and you want to experience this vibe again. And when you rewatch something that many times, when something is as rewatchable as this, I think it just makes sense that it's going to become one of the really beloved films that people they just want to watch over and over again. Like, I watched this last night and I'm already like, yeah, man, I would watch Point Break again. Like,
Uh-huh.
it's just a fun one to revisit.
Yeah, just to throw it on and yeah. I love all the fake bright red blood, very part of the
Oh,
atmosphere,
so
part of the
good.
vibes.
Yes.
Oh, it's so good. It's so bright. It's so
It
fake.
is. It is so bright.
I'm like, what happened here, y'all? So funny.
Oh, yeah. Not great. Not
Nope.
great.
Nope.
Can we also, you referenced this a little bit earlier, but I would like to give a shout out to some of the lines of dialogue that really just tickled me.
Yes.
There's at the end when Johnny catches up to Bodhi while skydiving, because that's a thing that people do. And then they're talking about like who's gonna pull the parachute. And Bodhi just says, "We're gonna be meat waffles." I just thought that was so funny. I was like, who says that? Who talks about meat waffles? It's so silly.
While you're
And
falling
then
through the air.
right,
Yeah.
and you're about to just be murdered because you're being stupid. It's fine.
Yep.
It's fine. It was great. Meat waffles. And then the other line that I really loved, and I laughed way too hard at it, but when Johnny is just initially learning how to surf and he drops in on that other guy's wave and ruins his run, the dude says, "Politeness counts, asshole." I just I loved that, because obviously this is a surfer bro. Why would he say politeness of all the words that he could use? But it's that 90s earnestness. Politeness counts, asshole. I loved it. It's like my new favorite phrase.
The 90s are so great. I love it. No, every time they fight, I'm like, ooh, they think they're being so bad. And they're like,
Yeah.
really going for the jugular. And I'm like, that is so kind of you to fight in this way. It's so great. There's a whole sequence where Johnny and Bodhi are in the plane at the very end, and Johnny's trying to get Bodhi to release Tyler, and he has like no game. He's just yelling, "Do it! Release Tyler! You gotta do it!" And I'm like, you couldn't have come up with a more compelling argument and a more compelling case, my dude. Like, he just really thinks that telling this man who has kidnapped this woman to just do it, just release her, is gonna work. I'm like, oh, that's cute. It's very
Mhm.
cute.
I mean, he still is a newbie FBI agent, so maybe he hasn't taken the like hostage release classes. Maybe that's like the 201 level, and he hasn't graduated to that yet.
Mm,
It's a big
yeah.
bummer.
Well, he's just saying exactly what he thinks and feels, apparently.
Right?
Yeah.
It's okay. He tried. And then he jumps out of a plane without a parachute. It's fine. Totally normal behavior, guys.
Dude. Yeah. Oh. Let's see, other things that I have on my list of notes. Oh my gosh. Can we talk about how the FBI officers at the end of the film show up to the 50-year storm, and they've got like what looks like shower caps, but for their like big tall hats with the brim? I thought that was so funny. Did you notice
It's
them?
so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to make sure that your hat is protected, though. Like, this is important business, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
Also, why is Keanu in like basically all denim in the pouring rain? Like, that has to be so uncomfortable. That is going to shrink and you're going to be just not able to move. He was like, I am uncomfortable watching you try and walk in these pants and like maneuver in this outfit because it's just raining too much.
My
Just not the
gosh,
move.
this man. Yeah. And then the dramatic, he tosses his FBI badge into the ocean. I'm
Right.
like, ooh, the drama. No, he didn't.
And just like that doesn't feel like a great way to like tender your resignation. Like
No, but
that's
he's
not how we do
he's
things, but
standing for
okay. I'm sure it
something.
felt great. Yeah.
Yeah, he's standing for
Yeah.
something.
Standing for something. We don't know what it is, but he is standing for it, and I wish you luck with that, Johnny. You stand for whatever you're standing for.
Oh man. Oh gosh. So funny. Let's see. Anything else that we didn't hit on yet? We hit them all.
I would like to give a shout out to John C. McGinley, who plays Harp, the really straight-laced boss. I just love John C. McGinley so much. He's so funny to me every time I see him. And he's perfect in this role. He does it so well. Straight face, just getting in people's faces and just being a jerk. And I loved it. It made my heart so happy. And it was a joy to see him in that role. So shout out to him for playing a really great 90s bad boss. He nailed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, it's just so fun seeing so many of these actors that we grow to know and
Mhm.
love throughout the rest of their careers, and kind of there's some of their early work and some of the things that are still so them that were so present back then. It's really great. Yeah. So good.
Yeah, the other thing that well, the two other things that I kept thinking about while watching this was I kept thinking about the movie Roadhouse, which also stars Patrick Swayze. And I watched Roadhouse for the first time, I think last year, and it's not a good movie, but Patrick Swayze makes that movie so much fun to watch. Like I had a great time watching Roadhouse, and it's just because of Patrick Swayze. And so then to see him in Point Break doing a very different character, but you see that same type of like, wow, he is doing such good work in this action movie. He's bringing so much to it that I can't help but have a good time. Like I was so impressed by his performances in both of those films because he's great in both of them. And then the other movie that I kept thinking about while watching this is Fast and Furious. The first Fast and the Furious movie is basically the exact same movie as Point Break. And that just brought me joy. And I want to go rewatch Fast and Furious again because it's almost exactly the same. So shout out to Fast and the Furious for borrowing from a really good movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have now filled in our movie history, movie portfolio with this film. So,
We have.
yes.
Yeah.
It's a great choice of Point Break. It was just such a good time. We needed this. We really did. And so fun to experience. Just a dose of like earnest goodness, Needed this in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, can I give one other shout out?
Yeah.
And that is I guess it's not a shout out, but the thing that I kept thinking about, and that's why I included it in my one sentence summary, is if that one surfer hadn't been obsessed with mooning everyone and everything, this case may never have been solved.
Never.
Like, it really just came down to the fact that this one dude just kept mooning people at every chance that he had. And if he had just resisted that urge, they could have all lived to surf another wave, Like, it really came down to that. And that is just something that made me laugh so hard once Johnny finally sees him moon somebody else and he puts it all together. It's like, man, if this surfer could have just had a little more self-control, this would have been a very different film. So, shout out to this case that was purely solved because the guy liked mooning people.
Yeah, they could have all like not died, and just survived.
Right?
Would have been
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. But There was that one guy just had that real strong compulsion, and I don't understand it.
Yeah.
And then everybody died. So I guess the moral of the story is don't moon people. And then you won't die.
Yeah. You might live to see
Seems like a good
another
moral.
day, perhaps. Yeah.
Yes. Live to surf another wave, you know?
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
resist the urge to moon people.
All right. Well, this is a great Oscar wager choice, a great time. This is perfect time as it's getting a little warmer too, and spring is coming and summer is coming. I'm like, just basking in the sun on the beach. We needed this as well, and hanging out with our boaty bros for 2 hours. It was a good time. So this was our review and discussion of Point Break. You can find it available on multiple streaming platforms. I think it's pretty widely available at this point, so you can definitely find this to be able to watch for free as a time of this recording. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about Point Break. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Movies and Us Pod, or email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. We will be back next week to discuss the new Bong Joon-ho film, Mickey 17. Super excited about that. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again with y'all very soon.